Greetings, travel aficionados. Welcome back to another episode of Travelpreneur. I'm Megan McSwain, your host, and today we're exploring the streets of Buffalo, New York on two wheels. Joining us today is Marc Moscato, the dynamic founder of Buffalo Bike Tours and Rentals. Marc combines his passion for public history and biking to offer unique, guided bike tours that delve into Buffalo's rich heritage. Marc, it's great to have you with us.
Oh, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
For sure. Marc, you've had a diverse career in public history before biking into the tour business, or tourism, I guess. What sparked the shift from traditional history roles to starting Buffalo Bike Tours?
Yeah, to be quite honest with you, I never liked history as a kid. It was like my least favorite subject. I was like, why do we have to learn, memorize all these facts and figures? How many times are we going to cover the, I don't know, Spanish Inquisition or something that's totally not relevant or has any implication to my life?
Right.
So history was not my favorite. The social studies were not my forte. But I grew up in Buffalo, and if you know anything about the city, it's in part of the Great Rust Belt here in Western New York. And, Bethlehem Steel was the largest employer. It employed 30,000 people a day. It's a working class city, and we experienced some immense prosperity at the turn of the last century, but by the middle of the century, those fortunes had declined. And so if you go downtown Buffalo, even today, there's a super high rate of vacancy. And I guess growing up in that environment, like I saw these vacant buildings and I thought you had no choice but to think like, well, what used to be there? Like,
Right. Yeah.
what the hell happened here? Why are there's all vacant buildings? And that made me, I guess, kind of curious about what are some of the social factors that shaped this place that I live in. And so I started as, in my late teens and early 20s to draw some of the lines between particularly like deregulation and policy and outsourcing of labor and about major factors that have shaped American life and society and our economy as a whole, and how Buffalo kind of lost a lot of jobs as a result. And that drew me to authors, for example, like Howard Zinn, who wrote A People's History of the United States. And so I began to be really interested in the idea of social history and of connecting people to place and seeing history as a lens to understanding our present conditions and how we could take collective action to, better inform our future decision making. So it's kind of a roundabout way of how I ended up having a sincere interest in history and community activism. So began very involved with bicycling from an early age too, and I founded a bike ride, oh my God, like so many years ago, but called Buffalo Critical Mass, taking inspiration from some of the rides in San Francisco and that were happening around the world. And it's been kind of a wild ride since then. I worked for a bunch of different nonprofits, arts organizations, museums, before founding one in Portland, Oregon, and then moving back to Buffalo about 6 years ago to be a part of the revitalization that's happening here.
Starting with free bike history tours in 2018 and growing that into a full business by 2019 is pretty impressive. Can you share how the community's response shaped your vision for Buffalo Bike Tours?
Yeah, I guess, I started off just, very grassroots. We didn't have any bikes. We didn't have anything really except an idea. And it was, me and actually at that time it was Nathan Hill. And I pretty much kind of put together an outline for, we called it the B-Sides ride. It was kind of an underground history ride. I thought everyone was going to be interested in history. We have like the Pan American Exposition, which was a World's Fair that happened here in Buffalo, New York. We have, of course, the Erie Canal that was based, the terminus was here in Buffalo. And I started just actually with our local community. So I started just making flyers. We actually have a very strong bike community here, passionate bike community here in Buffalo. People love, essentially like Buffalo has more snowfall than almost any U.S. city. So when the spring comes, everybody just like wants to be outside.
Of course, yeah.
Climate. So there's a ton of, like, surprisingly, there's a ton of bike lanes here that Frederick Olmsted designed the city. So there's a ton of these parkways and bike trails. Like, it's really like a great place to bicycle just and enjoy the city. But we have the largest bicycle fundraiser in the country, Ride for Roswell, for Cancer Research for the Cancer Research Institute. And we have the first bike share program in the country here with Ready Bike Share. So there's a ton of biking stuff already happening here, but there's really offering tourism, tours by bicycles. So, it's a small city. There's only 250,000 people who live in downtown Buffalo.
Oh, wow.
For 1 million with the metro area, but the city's shrunk a lot actually since the 1950s. But
This episode is brought to you by TravelPayments.com. Travel businesses have unique needs when it comes to credit card processing, from large average ticket sizes and tolerance for higher chargeback ratios to simple integrations with the most popular shopping cart systems. The travel industry specialists at TravelPayments.com have you covered. Unfortunately, many of the most popular credit card processors initially accept travel businesses, but without warning, freeze their merchant accounts and the thousands of dollars in them because these service providers don't understand or support the unique needs of travel industry business. Don't get stuck with one of the big guys who will freeze you out without a moment's notice. Instead, work with the travel industry specialists who will support your business every step of the way. Visit TravelPayments.com to get a free quote today.
Eventually, I got all those people to kind of like those first people to review us on platforms, which was huge, like TripAdvisor or Google My Business. And that began to kind of get the ball rolling with people finding us from out of town. So it was interesting. The very first thing that people probably asked me once they got here was not about the history, but was about chicken wings. And that's kind of our lowest common denominator that people know about. You say you're from Buffalo. Oh, buffalo wings. People now that eat for these chicken wings. And so that kind of led to our second tour, which was like this, we had a history tour. And then that led to like doing a chicken wing tour, because I just noticed that everyone, after they, the very first thing out of their mouth was like, Mark, where's the best place to go get chicken wings? And I was like mostly a vegetarian, so didn't know where to send them. But it occurred to me, people would probably pay me to take them around to these different wing spots. So it's just kind of growing from there. And, we really have grown, especially with like rentals in the last couple of years. So yeah, we do have a fleet of road bikes, of touring bikes. So some people will actually ride all the way from Buffalo, all the way down to Albany, do the length of the Erie Canal Trail, because we're mile marker 0. And then I have a bunch of e-bikes as well. So, giving people different options.
So they don't have to have their own bike. Like they get to use a bike on the tour.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, if they're locals and they want to bring their own bike, that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we do typically provide a bike rental.
Cool. And you mentioned the buffalo wings. You integrated food tours into these offerings, which I guess there was a demand for it, right? So how do these culinary experiences complement the historical narrative on your bike tour? Are they in, like, do you interweave them, or is it just kind of something to add on to the history part of it?
Yeah, so we have some straight up history tours, and then we have straight up like food tours. And food tours are a lot of fun, but they're, frankly, quite kind of a pain. It's like essentially like if you're organizing a tour, any additional variables beyond you can complicate it, and there's any number of factors that can go wrong. So I mean, obviously, if you're doing a bike, not only do you have the tour, but you have the bikes that could like break down or something, right?
Right.
All of that could go wrong. But then like you start introducing like, oh, we have 4 restaurants, and all of a sudden now there's like an additional 4 things that could go wrong.
Sure. Right. That makes sense.
It's kind of finding, we found like a way to streamline it with some people who are close to the organization, who are strong partners. But in general, yeah, food tours can be fine. I don't know if I necessarily recommend it, but they are really fun. And honestly, like, so we have like 2 main food tours. One is on the history of chicken wings. It's called the Wing Ride, the hidden history of
That's pretty cool. I can imagine people being interested in that.
Yeah, and it's interesting because there's a certain narrative. Like if you visit the city of Buffalo, there's kind of one bar that basically takes credit for the invention of wings. But
Mhm.
kind of what I try to do with this tour is I make it like open-ended to where someone just wants to enjoy chicken and they can do so. But if people want to like go a little bit deeper, I do explore some heavier subjects of authenticity, innovation, cultural appropriation, race and class in America. So I mean that's a lot of things all mashed up into one. But like there's of course like soul food in America, and that has a long lineage and tradition. And we probably would not have what we know of as chicken wings or fried chicken if it weren't for the history, quite frankly, of slavery. And chickens were the only livestock, for example, that African Americans were allowed to keep. So there's a long tie between soul food and chicken being on the plates and in the recipes of African Americans, and Buffalo being a major destination for what we call the Great Migration of African Americans going from the South to seek better paying jobs and a freer society up in the North. And some of these jobs that were in Buffalo in our wartime industries during World War I and World War II, people brought their recipes from the South, and that is kind of like the lineage. And so I've done a lot to highlight the story of a particular family. John Young it was his name, and he had a chicken wing shop in Buffalo, and he was kind of the first guy to do chicken wings full time. But so in that sense, we're able to kind of break down some of those barriers. Someone may not be comfortable with talking about, an issue like race or that they're just there on vacation, right?
Right. Yeah.
Like, oh, I'm just on vacation. I didn't know I was going to get some like woke chicken wings, or you know what I mean? But
Right. Like heavy topics. Yeah. No,
yeah, heavy
sure. That's
topics. But
understandable.
so it's set up in a way like the whole structure of the tour is set up in kind of a game situation where like we're going to present several different narratives here, and like the truth is like up for you to decide. We're not going to tell you like this is the we're going to present a series of different facts. You can come to your own conclusion.
Sure.
But first, it's like a great way to kind of break down some of those heavier topics because like
Right.
we're sitting around drinking a beer, eating some chicken wings, and being like, oh, where did these recipes come from? And
Right.
that's really interesting. I never really thought about it that way. And honestly, quite frankly, like as someone who's been involved in community activism and reflecting on my own life of any time I've changed my opinion about something, it has been in like small, situation where I was like talking to a friend or something like that. So in a way, I really feel like my job as a tour guide is an interpreter of history. And I feel like actually tour companies and tour guides have a responsibility, just as like there's a debate in this country about the history of statues, Confederate statues,
Right.
things being public. The same thing has to go with a tour guide. You are interpreting a story and presenting that to people. So those are some of the topics that I'm interested in exploring on the tours. I try not to do it in such a heavy-handed way as to like, offend or, but to engage people with some of those ideas.
Right. And, you were mentioning the weather earlier. It snows a lot there and people really want to get out. Given Buffalo's seasonal weather, how do you keep the business thriving outside the peak season when it's so very cold or when it's snowing and people don't necessarily want to be out on a bike?
Yeah, for sure. So we only operate May through October. I have several other jobs and endeavors. So I actually worked with that family, the family of John Young, to bottle his original chicken wing sauce. So that's another company that I'm a minority of. My wife has a food truck and commissary kitchen. And then believe it or not, I'm actually a consultant for tour companies. And I work for a company called Peak, which is the largest independently owned booking platform. So I help advise other people who have tourism businesses on how to grow their businesses.
Okay. And you've gotten media recognition from outlets like the New York Times and Food Network. I'm sure that exposure impacted your business. Can you share details about that?
Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. Like sometimes I guess the ROI, the return on investment, is like not always super apparent, but it's definitely an awesome thing to put on your website. And
Sure, yeah.
it's like bragging. It's like street cred. Oh, like yeah, well, hell yeah, they were on the New York Times or whatever.
Right.
Must be legit, right? Whereas like maybe like the sales aren't like necessarily tied. I mean, a big part of this is that like Buffalo is not a primary, like not a lot of people like choose to vacation in Buffalo, New York. It's not like tons of people are coming here like Paris or New York
Right.
City
Right.
or Rust Belt City. But people definitely have come on the tours because they saw something and they looked it up. And that's great, media collateral to put on, feature on the website and things like that. I have noticed it actually more with like the sauce company. Every time it airs on the History Channel, it's like all of a sudden there's like 30 orders. Like, I don't know where
Yeah.
it's coming from.
Right.
But I still will say one thing, like we actually, so one concept that I try to infer on some of the tours is a concept called reading the landscape. So there's a lot that we can tell, even if if you're in a downtown environment in pretty much any city, and there's a high density, and all of a sudden there's a parking lot. There was probably like a building there before, and there is a history there. So if we look at that, there's actually a lot that we can infer from something as boring as like this parking lot. We actually like look at the history of it, historic photographs, and kind of analyze it. And so, one of the things with the story, with the history of John Young and that, is that his restaurant is no longer there. And that's for a whole different bunch of reasons of instability financially and, racial instability in Buffalo. But because we had all this media exposure, I decided to launch a GoFundMe campaign. There was this incredible mural. I found this like photograph in the interior of John Young's restaurant, which had depicted John Young as the king of wings. He was in the heavens with 2 plates of chicken wings, overlooking the city from the heavens above. And I thought it was an incredible picture. So, I used that opportunity, the connection with Rachel Wharton from the New York Times, to launch a GoFundMe campaign. And we raised $10,000 to commission a series of artists to recreate that mural at the site of his location. And just what a cool thing to be able to say that like my company, my tourism company, which primary focus is tours, did this placemaking project where I can actually take my tour groups to remember the history, and the neighborhood itself can take pride in that story, and ownership of it is something I'm really proud of. And I think that like not many tour companies would kind of go out on a limb and their power to do. So that's something definitely that probably wouldn't have been possible without that media exposure. So I tried to kind of like leverage that to help tell that story.
For sure. And with the success of themed tours and a growing fleet of bikes, you mentioned e-bikes as well, what new offerings do you have planned in the future, if any, for Buffalo Bike Tours?
I think for this year, like what I'm trying to do actually is reduce the number of offerings. And like anytime you offer like a new product, then you have like tour guides that you have to train on new material.
On new stuff, right.
Reduce the number of options, actually. We will have a significant event, major event coming up next year, actually, because it will be the bicentennial of the Erie Canal. So there's going to be programming that's going to be activating the entire upstate New York corridor, with a major conference coming to Albany, and programming in and around Buffalo and beyond. We will be doing a whole bunch of free community tours already. Like we secured a grant funding for that because it's going to be a major event next year. But in general, I'm trying to kind of reduce and simplify the offerings. I guess I will say, like, we're always trying to tweak things, and we have this off season. It's like 6 months where we're not really in operation. So I'm always trying, how can I make my business bigger and better? I have thought about like a second location. Well, always ideas, but
Yeah.
in essence, my main goal for this coming year is just to kind of try to streamline, um, perhaps make less offerings, offer more rentals, because actually rentals are a lot less labor intensive. To make $1,000 on a tour, you might have to do like, I don't know, 3 or 4 tours, and rentals you could just give the bike to the family and
Right. And let them go. You're right. Yeah.
and you just have maintenance to deal with, afterwards maybe. But
Yeah.
um, yeah, not really looking at this current moment to really expand too much. I'm more focused on kind of like improving efficiency.
Sure. And for those people who are listening or might be inspired by your journey looking to start their own niche tour company, what advice would you give about creating a compelling and authentic experience?
It's a great question. I guess I would say, being open to sincerely the community wants and needs, starting small as possible. I started with no bikes whatsoever. We were literally using like the ready like bike share bikes that
Mhm.
they, like the city bikes in New York or whatever.
Yeah.
And we ran into some technical difficulties there, but all part of the learning process. If you could, the great thing about a tour business is that your expenses, unless you're starting like a bus tour or something, like a walking tour or something like a bike tour, the investment cost is going to be like very inexpensive as opposed to like, I don't know, my wife has a food, truck and commissary kitchen. She's looking at like getting a brick and mortar for her restaurant.
Right.
It's going to be like several $100,000 at a bare minimum.
Yeah.
Starting a tour company, you could do for like a couple $1,000 sometimes, right?
Yeah.
So, I just say, try starting small, run some tours with your friends and family, get their feedback, take it to heart. And, try to figure out maybe like, what is your key value proposition? What are other people doing? What is the, your unique, thing that you can offer the world?
Yeah.
That said, like I said, my actual job, my job with a capital J is being a consultant for other tour operators and tour companies. So I'm happy to make myself available. If anyone just wants to drop me a line, happy to do so.
Yeah, actually, go ahead and share where our listeners can connect with you or learn more about Buffalo Bike Tours and connect with you separately on the consulting if they would want to.
Sure, you can just drop me an email. It's marc@buffalobiketours.com, and be happy to set something up.
Great. And is there a website for the Buffalo Bike Tours? Is that buffalobikestours.com?
You got it.
Okay, good. That was a lucky guess. Well, Mark, thank you so much for sharing how you've peddled your passion into a thriving business that brings history and culture to life for so many and incorporating food into that. I love that. To our listeners, don't forget to check out Buffalo Bike Tours and Rentals if you find yourself in New York, and make sure to follow and subscribe to Travelpreneur for more stories like Mark's. Thank you so much, Mark. We hope to talk to you again in the future.
Thanks for having me. We'll catch you later. Thanks.
For sure. Bye-bye.